All right. Good evening, good morning, and a warm welcome to everyone who has joined the event across all our various time zones. Welcome to another episode of your Mocha's Global Product Acers Webinar, where we talk with industry thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and product professionals to break down the vision of creating a product which can impact countless users. And we sincerely hope that this inspires you, all of our learners, to create the next big thing. Check out the event link below for all of our series of webinar discussions, which will help you in understanding the how to create the next meaningful product and disrupting business at the same time. Having said that, today we are going to talk about a very strategic and an important piece in building of any product, a product strategy. Without this element in place, it will always be an uphill battle of creating a meaningful product. Not to mention, you will be burning cash, resources, and the all important resource, time. Product managers need to understand what is a bad strategy so they can guide in the correct path and ensure proper utilization of all resources. And for a great strategy, they need to execute that smooth and fast. So, with that in mind, I would like to welcome Sindhu Reddy, product manager at American Eagle Outfitters, to share her thoughts on how to create that right product strategy. Welcome, Sindhuja.
Thanks, Raj.
All right, so yeah, you have the stage. Go for it.
Yep. I am sharing my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can now. Yep.
Okay. So we are here to basically talk about creating product strategy. A little bit of introduction about myself. This is my part to product management. I initially got a bachelor's degree in engineering, and then I joined TCS as an associate PMO. That is when I actually figured out that I'm more of a management person than technical. So I decided to pursue my MBA. I did my MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management. It's a part of ASU. After doing that, I worked for as a consultant for a couple of months, but then I joined American Eagle, and I've been with them for the past 5+ years. I initially started out as a business system analyst, moving on to the product owner role, and finally the product management manager. Right now, I'm a product manager at AE, and the product I handle is the loyalty program. So, like I said, I'm the product manager for AEO loyalty program, and our program is called the Real Rewards. So let me give a little highlights about the company. AE is a clothing and accessories retailer. We mainly have jeans and lingerie. We have several brands such as AE, Unsubscribed, AE77, which all tie into the AE brand. Now, coming to Real Rewards, it's our loyalty program which encompasses everything. It's a clear and simple points based system. That is, the more you spend, the more points you gain, and the more points you gain, the more rewards you get. That's basically how it's set up. But apart from that, we give some more benefits to the customer, like we give free shipping, free returns, or some other special benefits are also given to the customer. Now, moving into the agenda for today, I'm first going to talk about product strategy, then about the product life cycle, and then steps to identify these opportunities and some of the common mistakes and remedies which we can take to avoid them. First, going into product strategy. What exactly is product strategy? It is the product objective. That is, as product leaders, we are guardians of the product strategy. We are responsible to identify and maintain what our product path going forward will be. But in case if we lack the strategy, it will lead to multiple failures. First is like we introduce products and features and they may ultimately fail. Then, as Raj was mentioning, if we don't have a good strategy, it leads to wastage of resources, and that is like it can be money, it can be time, and even man hours. So we definitely want to avoid not having the strategy to go forward with the product. But like I said, what I consider as a product manager is a product manager is basically a guardian for your product strategy. Is responsible to decide what is valuable, what is not valuable, which path to be followed, and if in case for some reason you're deviating from the path, to make sure that you're in the same course. So while developing a strategy, it's very essential to remember certain things. The first thing is like, what are the products or features we want to develop, and how do we differentiate ourselves from our competitors in the market? How does a product come across? Then we need to look at the market segments. We need to see who we are catering to, and finally, when we identify the market segment, the next important thing is the positioning of the marketing segment. So considering this, for me, when I'm doing the loyalty program, American Eagle caters to young adults. That's basically, it's a retailer company. We sell clothes focusing on young, late teenagers, early 20 people. So that is my market segment, and I need to make sure that my loyalty program stays appealing to them, and that's where I position myself. Next, coming to the product life cycle. Like I said, a product manager's job is to envision the success of the product. How he does that, or how we do that, is by coming up with various strategies, various features which support this, and making sure we look through it until it's achieved. This is broadly looking, these four steps are broadly how we can define a product life cycle. There are several steps within it, but just looking at this, the first step is opportunity identification. That is where I was talking about strategy. We decide what we need to do here, we plan what needs to happen here, we come up with features and roadmaps. That is this phase. And in this webinar, we are focusing on opportunity identification. But a product manager's role doesn't end here. They're also responsible for in the next subsequent phases as well. They'll be part of the planning and goal setting. That's basically to decide what needs to happen, and also the solution exploration and development phase. That's what they do. They work with the engineering teams, with architects, to come up with the best solution. And finally, after the launch, they also have to look at the results and assess and see if it's profitable, if it's successful. If it is, then how do we enhance it, how do we scale up? If it's not, then how do we mitigate it? All this is what a product manager does. But like you see, the first step is opportunity identification, which is the most important phase of it. Now, what is the role of a product manager in opportunity identification? So first thing is like, the product manager is responsible for the product path. So they need to frame the long term product strategy. I don't mean to say that you need to know 100% what is going to happen in the future, or what you're going to do, but you need to have at least a vision on where you're going and what will happen. Because sometimes, some at least for the next couple of years, so that you can have an idea of what features will fit in and what will not. And the next one is devising a living and growing roadmap. Roadmap is basically a path of your products and features. It's a list of all the products and features you'll be taking up. But what I mean by living and growing, I'll discuss it later. Next, it's fulfilling the customer need. One of the major things what a product manager needs to keep in mind is to make sure the customer needs and requirements are met. By customer, I mean here the end user. Since I'm in the retail space, it's basically customers and consumers who are buying the products. But you can also be in B2B spaces, or you can be in enterprise development, which is basically your end users or internal users. So here, I mean the end users' need should always be met. And finally, we're also looking at solving customer problems or any issues that are there that needs to be solved. This is overall what we are trying to achieve in a strategy, but how do we actually go about doing this is the question at hand. First, let's start with the W's. What I mean by W is the why and what. Always start with the why and what. Like, why is it a pain point, or why do we think there is an opportunity? What can we do to improve it? That those should be the questions we start with. Sometimes the question of the problem is pretty obvious. We think that everyone in the room knows it, but irrespective of that, you should start with these questions, because if you don't, what happens is, when you directly start with a solution, or directly skip this role and start with what we want to do, what happens is we might not actually end up solving the problem, and we can work with something rigid or purely executed solutions. And also, there's this caveat, like, you think that everyone is on the same page, but it's not necessarily that everyone's on the same page. So it's always helps starting with the basic, which is what is the problem, and then building up from there. By doing so, what we are doing is we are understanding the opportunity and problem, And we are also setting up our success metrics. We understand what we are trying to achieve, and finally we'll bring alignment across the board. We'll make sure that everyone is on the same page. So it's always advisable to start with the W. That'll be the first step, the first basic foundation step. The next one would be identifying the value. So, here, like I said, as a product manager, you're balancing two sides of the coin. One is the customer or the end user's need, the other is the business need. As for us, we need to find that integration between both these, the mid ground, which will be the value, which is what will go on our product roadmap and which will be a part of our strategy. How do we achieve this? First, we need to understand the customer need. We start with identifying the who, the personas. What I mean by that is basically understanding our target audience. It's always necessary to understand the target audience and start from there. Like, for example, in loyalty program at AE, it's basically customers, repeated customers who are coming, but it's not essentially the same thing across the platform. You can have customers who shop every month a little amount, but they're every month. But you can also have customers who come back only in the holiday season. That's basically the Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year season. They come back and they shop in huge lump amounts, but once a year. Both these customers are valuable in different ways. So when we are developing a product or developing a feature for them, it's very essential to identify which customer or who's my target audience. Once I do that, what we'll have to do is we need to collect customer inputs and insights. We need to use our analytics team. We need to do focus groups. We can send out questionnaires. We basically want to understand what are the pain points or opportunities we are looking to develop. Once this data comes back to us, we have to establish the gaps. That is basically when you start out with these assumptions. Like I said, first we ask the question why and what, and then we start looking at identifying the target audience. But at somewhere along this, we start making some assumptions. We need to make sure that the analytics we get back is validated by these assumptions, or is our data supported, are we on the right path? And then we come to customer metrics. Speaking about metrics, another important tidbit is it's always essential to look at the correct metrics. We have genuine metrics and we have vanity metrics. So, genuine metrics are metrics which actually make sense to us. I can give an example for this. So, as a loyalty program, one thing which really is important for us is subscription or logging in. And since, as I was telling, it's basically a $0 login. So, anyone who has an email address can sign up and log in. But what if a customer logs in but never returns for a purchase? He never comes back or never shops in the site, never does anything. Then do I really count him as a valuable customer? If I just take registration numbers, then that it does not cover this part of a customer journey. So that becomes a vanity metrics. But in turn, if along with the registration, I also take in like, is he active, has he made a purchase? If I'm able to take that into consideration, that becomes a valuable metrics. So that's what we need to make sure, that anytime we are looking at metrics, we are looking at genuine metrics and not vanity metrics. So now we've identified the customer, we've identified the persona, their pain points, what they're looking at, and also the metrics. Now we move on to the next side of it, which is basically the business need. In the business need, when we are developing the product strategy, we need to identify and make sure that our individual product strategy sits well within the organization strategy pillar. Sometimes when you're working in like startups or smaller companies, you're the only product manager. But there might also be, when you're working in larger organizations, you have several product managers you're working simultaneously with. Like for instance, I am the product manager for at AE for loyalty, but there are also like for checkout and for part to product, which is basically our search and browse page. So you have other product managers. So you need to make sure that your product strategy fits well with other products and also overall into the organization vision and roadmap. Next important thing is identifying the stakeholders. This might sound very simple, but it can get tricky at times because you need to identify all stakeholders who will be impacted or who will need to consume your product or feature. Sometimes you might not consider someone as a stakeholder, but they might be impacted by it. So it's very essential that you do your research and make sure everyone is covered. And then business metrics. Business metrics can be a little different from customer metrics. Business metrics can be ROI, or how we are trying to get benefit from these features. So it's always essential to analyze what business metrics will be impacted and what won't be impacted. Finally, it's very essential to stick within the brand. For example, say your company is an eco-friendly brand, but you come up with a feature which is generating a lot of waste. That means you're deviating from your company's brand. So you don't want to do that. So while keeping the company and overall brand in mind, that's what you design the product for. So now we have customer need, we have business need, we identify what are the expectations, and we map it out. And when we finally figure out where it integrates, the common space which between the two, that is what your value is, and that's what you're trying to achieve here. So now to recap, we've identified the why and what. Then we moved on to identifying the value, which is necessary for both customer and business. And the next step would be competitive market analysis. So, like I said, in the previous step, we identified the target audience. So now we have to make sure that we are grasping our customers' expectations. We are meeting whatever they want, and we are not going out of the boundaries of it. Then we have to compare our product with other competitors. Here it's necessary to look at direct competitors, indirect, and non-competitors. What I mean by this is, like, for example, in my case, AE is a clothing brand. For us, the direct competitors would be someone like Abercrombie and Fitch, or H&M are our direct competitors. So we look at their loyalty program, see if something's interesting, and see if we can utilize something. But we shouldn't stop right there. We have to move ahead and look at indirect competition. Like, I can think of example like Amazon Prime is a very good loyalty program, or Sephora. Though both of them are not in the same retail space as us, there is still indirect competition when it comes to the loyalty program. Then when it comes to non-competitors, let's take airlines industry. They have one of the most aggressive and competitive loyalty programs on the board. So it's always interesting to look at them and see if they're coming up with any different strategy or something. So after we look at the competition, another thing we can look at is always look for industry innovators or disruptors. There's always something new coming up somewhere out there. So always look for something that's interesting. Another tidbit would be to look across the globe, something in parallel or international markets. Like, for instance, AE is based in North American markets, both Canada and US, and we are expanding into Mexico. But it always helps looking at European markets or Asian markets. Sometimes there is a feature or something in Indian retail space, which we really like, which can be incorporated into it. So you can get ideas and inspiration from anywhere. So be open to that. Finally, when we've done all these three, now we are at a spot where we are ready to build our roadmap. Like I said initially, what is a roadmap? A roadmap is essentially your path to product. Why do we need, there is also this question as why we are in agile teams. Why do we need roadmap? A roadmap is essential for basically being predictable. It also helps other parts of your organization to do stuff. Like, for example, it helps with staffing requirements, it'll help with budgeting and stuff like that. So your roadmap will help your organization. It helps bring a rhythm to your product. So then I mean, build a living roadmap. What do I mean by living roadmap? Don't be rigid with your roadmap and your ideas. Always build it, like, you need to be able to change, develop, move on. So that's what your roadmap should be. And it should also be an outcome based roadmap. So basically, we'll be looking at what are we providing to the customer rather than what are we building. So that's a different approach. So how do we come to build this roadmap? There are several steps involved in it. First step is to review the current state. So whatever the current state or the current feature we are in, we'll have to take a look at it, assess it. Sometimes we're just starting from scratch, so we need to figure out where do we start from. And second would be consider the future request. It can be the immediate request, it can be a priority request, or it can be something we're looking at way into the future, but have an idea of all those future requests. And the next step would be actually validating them. Not all initiative, not all requests are worthy of spending time. So it's, as a product manager, you need to do that first initial analysis of what makes sense. Then we move on to investigating if there are any new pain points. It's not always that the opportunity or the pain point finds you. Sometimes we need to go out there and look at what the opportunity or pain point is, and sometimes we need to make our product better. So that's what we do here. Now, after doing all this, we have an idea backlog. There is no limit of idea backlog. You can have hundreds of issues, you have 200s of issues. It's basically a compilation of all the ideas or all the things related to your product. The richer this idea backlog is, the better it is. So you can always pull it up, prioritize from it. The next most important thing is prioritization. So, like I said, you have your idea backlog, which is like hundreds of ideas, and it's not necessary that you'll be delivering on all of them. As a product manager, it's our responsibility to prioritize, to see what can be delivered in the time frame. Yes, but it's not like we are order takers, or it's not a solo person show. You have different stakeholders. You need all of their alignment to make sure that you understand what is being prioritized. And also, you do not take orders. You also have to put in your own assessment to see, like, if someone's requesting, if one of your stakeholder is requesting, you need to see if it really makes sense to go down that path. Is it really adding the value? Once you do that, you have a good roadmap. So what are essentials to build a good roadmap? First, it's like we need clear identification of stakeholders. I can't stress this enough. There has been instances when we missed a stakeholder and they've been heavily impacted by a feature or a feature or something we've launched. We don't want to be in that situation, so it's always better to over communicate and make sure we get sign off from everyone. Next, always having clarity on what your current work is. That will help you avoid problems down the road. And also transparency. Maintaining transparency is a responsibility of a product manager. Then the most important thing is to alignment across the board. You need all your stakeholders to be on the same page, not only about the features which are being worked upon, but also on the prioritization, which is like the process why we are coming there. I can give an example about it. Say your marketing team is requesting a new feature to be developed. At the same time, your engineering team also has technology requirement where they need to update the platform or something. It doesn't make sense to first build a marketing request and then move it to a new platform, which just adds on to the existing work. So as a product manager, you need to prioritize and tell that we'll have to first work on the platform and then take up the marketing team's request for a feature. It's always challenging as a product manager to give the bad news, but you need to be sure to give it in such a way that you don't offend anyone. Then we move on to periodic reviews and reassessment. It's all, like I said, it's a living document. It needs to be reviewed, it needs to be reassessed. You need to have that scope to make the changes. For example, when we did the 2020 roadmap, we had so many things in our plan. We were envisioned to go down a road that year, but as all of us know, pandemic came and everything changed. Over 1,000 plus stores across US were shut down, so we had to quickly shift our entire focus onto our digital platform, and we had to cater and deliver features which we had way down the roadmap, but we had to bring it up and deliver at this point of time. So as a product manager, you should be able to reassess and do what is necessary. You shouldn't be rigid and fixed within your own time space. Once we do that, next we come to the outcome versus feature based approach. What I've been talking so far is outcome based approach. So basically, what an outcome answers is, why do we think there is a point and what opportunities we are closing. That is the why part of the question, which I mentioned at the initial first step of this presentation. The second, while if in the feature, however, we are looking at the solution part of it. So how do we provide a solution, or what are the MVP we are delivering? That's what we'll be looking at it. So as a product manager, you need to be more focused on the outcome than the feature itself when you start out, because the outcome based, it's a customer based solution, not a technology based solution. And also, you'll have it on your product roadmap, not the delivery roadmap. In most of the organizations, your product and delivery roadmaps are same. That's fine if it's same, but it still makes sense to at least have it in your head mapped out. A roadmap should be a little different from delivery roadmap, because in a product roadmap, you're catering to the end customer. The pros would be, since the problem is identified at the beginning, you can also have an opportunity to look at multiple solutions. We also reevaluate our assumptions. It's not necessary that the solution you think is the right solution. There can be another better option out there. So when you start with the outcome based approach, you may get a better solution. But when you start with a feature based approach, it's not necessary that it will solve the problem at hand, and it is also a rigid solution, and it may not actually deliver what you are intending to deliver. I can give an example, a couple of examples. So take this. So the idea or the problem at hand is we want to make it easier for young users to promote a product. That's what we are looking at. And one of the ways we can do it is social media integration. True, that's right. So if we directly start with the social media integration part of it, we can spend a lot of money on developing the feature, and we do it. But once we launch it, we realize that customers or the users are not really using social media, because maybe they don't want to actually post stuff on Instagram or TikTok. They would rather just post a review or send a feedback within our site. So you spent so much money in developing the integration, but it didn't really meet your requirement. That's not a situation where we want to end up being. So what we want to do is we want to first start with the question, do the research, do the analysis. So maybe even there might emerge a solution which is even better than what we imagined. Next, another example I can think is we are looking at, like, maybe you're in a holiday season and you want to accommodate a lot of consumer volumes. The one way to do that is a platform or technology upgrade to the latest version. But if you don't start with the problem at hand, or problem what you're trying to solve, it might happen that the technology team might not have enough database or enough space of what you're looking to achieve. So always start at the beginning and then develop over it. That'll give you the robust strategy. Now, in conclusion, these are some of the common, what I've been speaking all this time. Some of the common mistakes we do is we focus too much on the how rather than the why and what. And we also stick to our rigid fixed solutions. We have certain assumptions and we want to stay with it. That's when the problem arises. We come up with static features which do not move or which we do not want to change. And then we are very set on our assumptions. That's where the problems come. And how we can remedy is, though it's tedious, we start, and though it might feel repetitive, we start with the why and what, and then we are focusing on the problem itself. Then the solution, the way we get to the solution is important as a product manager, and we want to figure that out. And finally, we have to start with the outcome.
All right. Thank you, Sindhija, for that information. I think this was really helpful in the sense that it really outlined like how do you go about in creating a specific product strategy, right? And also like a couple of your examples were really on the spot, like because the examples definitely help out in basically trying to implement all of this knowledge into the real life, because like theoretical knowledge can be anything, but if you have the practical experience and the practical knowledge, that definitely helps in creating a much better and a much aligned product which a user can ingest, right? So, all right, thanks for that. Let's actually address if there are any questions through our surveys or during the live event. If someone has posted the question, let's bring up some of the questions. Okay, so the first question being, when doing a competitive analysis, how do you bucket which is your direct, indirect, and non-competitors? So I think this refers to your earlier slides, right?
Yeah.
During that competitive analysis, and I think this is a great point, like especially for startups, like if you're a big organization, of course, like you have your identified competitors, like Amazon has Flipkart, Salesforce has something else. But for startups, like how do you identify which comes to your direct competitor and an indirect competitors?
So your direct competitor is basically someone who's in the same space as you. Essentially, they're providing the same product and service. They're maybe with a slight variation. They're essentially using the same technology or providing the same service. But when it comes to indirect, it means that they're not exactly in your space. Like I was explaining in my case, American Eagle is a young people jean and t-shirt
Right.
brand. So when you're looking at it, you will call your H&M or Abercrombie and Fitch or Forever 21 as a direct competitors, because essentially they're selling the same product. So we'll talk to them. But then you have Amazon or Sephora, which is basically another company, but they're also retailer, they're also online platforms, they're also doing the same thing, but they're not essentially a direct competition to you, because Amazon doesn't exactly sell the same products as us. Yes, definitely they do have some jeans and stuff, but that's not their MVP, or that's not the one they're always selling. So they come as indirect competitors. Then you also have non-competitors. They're not essentially anywhere near to you, but somehow you can pick up ideas from them or pick up how they're doing stuff, which can also benefit you.
Okay. Okay. So basically, you're saying like whichever it's more if a product is basically coming up with the same sort of services, then that becomes more of a direct competitor. And if it's like a sub service or service which is similar to what you're building, then that can be termed as an indirect competitor. Okay.
Yeah, you find your most similarities with your direct competitor, while your
Right.
indirect competitors, you do find some overlapping things. Like for example, maybe both Amazon and AE sells online, so they're essentially a digital e-commerce, but
Right.
not
Right.
essentially their product or service match. So you, as a startup, you can have a total different product, but someone is still using the same technology or the same supply chain or distribution method, then you would consider them as your indirect competitors.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Let's have the next question. Okay. As a product manager, how would you measure the success or failure of your product strategy? I guess this is like a no-brainer question because after all, every strategy requires requires a success or failure, right? So how would you measure this as a product manager?
So like I was saying, your product strategy, your roadmap should be living. So one of the main things, the reason it needs to be a growing document or a growing strategy is like when you see a failure, you need to be able to pivot and make the changes. In
Right.
order to be able to do that, you definitely need to know what a success or a failure is. And now mainly we can utilize our metrics for it. We are so into like data, metrics, analysis, and stuff like that right now. So when you are deciding a strategy or a feature or a product, even while in the inception discovery phase, during the planning phase, it's our responsibility to like decide on what are the KPIs or the metrics we are looking at. And that's where the point I was mentioning earlier, it's essential that you identify what a genuine metrics is as opposed to a vanity metrics, because vanity metrics might seem exorbitant, might say your product is successful, but like if it's not the right metrics, then you're not essentially validating your product and you might end up in a bad spot. So your success metrics should be something, and it's also like goals. It's also essential to like set target dates and times. Like you just can't say like, oh, I need to succeed, I need to hit 100K indefinitely. No, you need to have a time frame in the first quarter or like in a year or something like
Right.
that. If that doesn't happen, that's when you, the last phase as a product manager, you assess and enhance. So you assess why you're not able to do that. Maybe your product is not connecting with the customers. That's when you need to go do the surveys and like pivot or like sunset the product. Or maybe it can be that yes, it's connecting, but it's hard to use, the user interface is hard. That's when you need to change your the look and feel of your product. So it's always like you need to keep improving yourself. That's when you validate your product.
Right. And coming to this to the point where you mentioned about the time based, right? Like, uh, I think yes, definitely. Like time is definitely should be a factor in measuring that success and failure. But how do you assess that time? Like how much time do you give, or how less of a time do you give? Because like there can be some time where a strategy or an entire marketing effort requires a longer time frame to actually for the users to actually imbibe that, yes, okay, this is something that I want. For example, like for a digital clothing brand, right? Like maybe that time is during the holiday season. Like if you're marketing concentrated enough, so if the brand picks up traction during the holiday season, then you measure that was a good strategy. But what if it's a non-shopping season? How much time do you actually give for that strategy to evaluate whether this is the correct or a repivot is required?
That's a very good point. So one of the things is like you just can't pull the numbers from thin air. Like you need to come up with it with your various data models. Like have you come up with pricing? You just can't come up with a price just out of like why do we want to do it? You like how much do you spend, how much you want to earn profit, you come up with a strategy, there's an equation to it. Similarly, when you're coming up with metrics, we have to do the same thing. You need to have your data. If you're working in a large organization, you usually have your data engineers running your numbers and giving you an
Right.
extrapolation. If not, even in startups, what you need to do is like you need to see another important thing before defining the metric is what you said. There are multiple factors which will be doing it. Like for retail, holiday is the peak season, but say I'm if the non-holiday, non any season, you will not see the same numbers at the same time. Like for example, I'm launching my product, but at the same time there is like another huge company launching another product, so my product will not get the visibility. There are a lot of other factors which needs to be factored in. So when you're coming up with this KPIs, numbers, timelines, all those needs to be addressed. It's a long drawn process. You need to have your own charts, you need to have it, and finally you come up with that number which makes sense to everyone. And it's always not correct. Like when you're setting your success metrics, you set it for like a quarter, the first quarter, the second quarter, and after 1 year. But
Right.
when you after first quarter, you need to come and assess that are we meeting it, are we at least close enough? If we are not, why are we not close enough? Did we like exorbitantly estimate our success and are we way off in numbers? Then you need to readjust your numbers for Q2 and the next year. But sometimes it's like, yeah, we actually underestimated, our product is doing very well. Then you need to increase your assessment for the next coming quarters.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Okay, let's move to the next question. Okay, have you encountered any challenges because of iOS 14 tracking related updates? And the second part of the question becomes how prioritization is done at AE. Do you follow any framework, or is it a trade off like revenue generation features and customer related features? So let me try and concise this question then. So I think the first part of the question becomes a little more technical oriented, because yes, Apple I think has introduced like some sort of security features that track or that limit the advertising or marketing abilities. So I think that becomes the first part of the question, and I think the second part of the question is more product oriented. That how do you prioritize yourself at AE or in any other organization, and if there is any specific framework that you follow in doing this prioritization.
Okay. For the first question, like you said, it's a little technical, so I might not be the right person to answer it. That being said, we've always encountered, irrespective of Apple introducing the tracking related upgrades, even before that, we've had many legal call outs from across the globe where you're restricted to only certain things you can allow. Like in US, there are some restrictions, but Canada has different rules, and then you also have Europe, which has another rules or something. So we've always been working around it, figuring out how we want to do it. So it's not that there are challenges, we just need to adhere to it and work around it, so that's there. And coming to prioritization, how we don't actually use these frameworks which are mentioned. How we do it is like, one of the things we do is we get all our stakeholders into one place, we have this idea bucket or pool, and we discuss what we have. And there are always trade-offs. Sometimes we can only commit to so much, so we'll
Right.
have to be able to get everyone on board. Excuse me. So it doesn't always work. Sometimes someone's like, yeah, we definitely want this feature, then it's as my responsibility to make sure that everyone's on board.
Okay. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions? Okay, we have another one. Uh, Okay, how do you keep the engineers happy so they are up to date with the latest technology, but at the same time, business is not really looking for any changes in UI or backend? This might lead to attrition in the team. So I think what the question really wants is, like, of course there will always be two sides to a group, right? Like, one, there will be the product group, and then there is an engineering group. So how do you manage that, like, where coming from a product background, like, how do you convey your vision to the engineering team, and also, making them see the larger picture of what you are envisioning for the product? So how do you do that?
Yeah, that's always been a challenge where you have to manage your business side and your engineering side.
Right.
Sometimes, like I was mentioning, engineering has hard stops. Like there's a technology you definitely have to upgrade. Like say Oracle is no longer going to support a platform or something like that. We definitely have to upgrade. But at the same time, I also have business and marketing partners talking about like, oh, I need a feature for this holiday season because that's like the brilliant
Right.
idea everyone is doing. And so it's always that pain, like you need to make everyone happy, but it's also that you can't do everything at the same time. So what we do is like we talk timelines, like are we able to get both within the scope, like maybe not immediately but at least a little later. We can do first a technology update and then get on board with what feature they're asking. Another thing I personally do and we've been encouraged to do is like we don't keep the strategy and roadmaps only to ourselves. We make sure that we discuss it with our engineering folks as well so that they feel inclusive. They understand what they're building, why they're building, and where it sits in the larger platform. It
Right.
energizes them and gives them like idea on what to do. Apart from that, we also have like some non-functional work which is happening simultaneously. It's not always like you're able to give everyone every sprint, every all the time work. There's always a good amount of backlog where the engineering folks are also building. So when there is a downtime or something like that, they pick up some of them and we try to get both of them done.
Okay. So in this case, like, would you say that the engineering team also becomes a stakeholder for your product roadmap?
Yeah, definitely. Engineering is also a stakeholder because, like you said, you can't plan a whole bunch of features, and but someone comes in and says that, oh, we are updating the entire platform, so this
Right.
whole year there is no feature doing. Then what does your roadmap even mean? Like
Right.
it doesn't make sense. So engineering is definitely part of the your stakeholder as well, and they're very good in giving inputs and stuff like that. So it's like sometimes I've also had like this huge feature, some of my business partners have asked for it, and I've got feedback from engineering saying that you don't need to do that in one phase. Something we can launch
Mhm.
an MVP and then do a scale up eventually in a couple of years or something like that. So having engineering in those discussion definitely helps.
Okay. So, so I guess the bottom line is to make good with the engineering team as well.
Yeah, always keep them happy. It always works
Right.
for me.
Right. Okay. Are there any other questions? Let's see. Okay. What can be a couple of useful tactics to evaluate market research? I guess this definitely becomes a crucial question, like when you're defining or creating the initial part of a product strategy. I guess like this, the market research definitely comes in because that will influence your defining of that product roadmap, right? So, what would you suggest?
This is a very complicated answer because, like, I remember when I was doing my MBA, there was a whole coursework for this. I think I had like 2 semester worth of work doing this. There's no simple answer to it because, like, you need to have your analytics team working with you. You need to have your different mappings on what is happening. You need to stay up to date all the times. So it's market research is also like you get a ton of research from analytics. It's not always useful to you. It's not,
Right.
sometimes like you get research which doesn't even make sense to me. So it's up to you to filter those information and make use of what it is. But it also helps, like whatever research you get, what information you're getting, always have a backlog of it. So once, like For example, 6 months down the lane, someone proposes another feature, a feature you've never spoken about or never thought about. But if you had a market research, or you had someone, some customer interested in it, or some competitor doing it or something like that, you can always go back and refer to it. This market research definitely supports what you're doing in the strategy, but it's a whole level of complicated to get into details on how you want to go into market research.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. If there are there any other questions? Let's see. Okay. Does product positioning come into the aspect of defining a product strategy? Again, I think this is like before you start to create a product strategy or a product roadmap. I guess the positioning definitely comes into the picture, like where you would want to product position your product, like especially for example, the clothing brands, right? Like should that be an e-commerce product, or more of a lifestyle brand, or more of a clothing organization which just sells digitally, right? So I guess that's where the question comes in, that where does the product positioning come into the aspect of defining the strategy?
Product positioning is very, very important, because like product positioning is also like you identify your market share, and then you how you position yourself within it. So it's essentially identifying the correct target customers and catering to them. For example, I was talking about AE, where we cater to young adults. So it's like, yes, you are in your teens, you're in your late teens, your 20s, and thinking about my product, which is a loyalty product, I get it. If you're in your late teens or 20s, you have your own accounts, you can handle it. But there are people who are like, we have 15 years old, 16-year-olds shopping with us or products for them, and they are not essentially having their own accounts because they're not even supposed to be in the loyalty programs. So at that time, it's their parents accounts they're using, or the parents are shopping for them. So if I don't understand this positioning, if I don't understand who I'm catering to, then my products doesn't make sense, or my communication will not make sense. So
Right.
you need to know where you sit in the market structure, so that you can be more specific, more direct to your customers. You can attract them and make sure that your product is directly talking to them and it's useful to them.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's have another question. How to be flexible with your product strategy with a market change and be ready to address that change? Okay. Interesting
That's
question.
an interesting question. So my suggestion would be, don't have a plan for like the next 5 years or like next two
Right.
years or something like that. Definitely have a backlog, but always think short term. Maybe next 3 months, maybe next when you're in like, say, next 3 months, a quarter or something like that, when you're
Right.
almost approaching the end of it, reassess and see what you want to do for the next 3 months. Like for example, if you have a feature, if you have a whole year's roadmap, also sometimes it becomes challenging. Sometimes when you're in January, you might decide that this feature or this product makes sense, but when you have it slated for the later in the year, say October or November. But when you
Right.
come to October or November, you realize that it doesn't even make sense, or there was a competitor who already introduced it and the product really didn't do well or something like that.
Right.
So you must be open to change your strategy. So it's like, always have like periodic checkpoints after a feature is completed, or before you take up a feature, evaluate if it even makes sense anymore, because like they mentioned, it's a ever changing market and you need to be able to catch up with it.
Right. But in this point, so where you said that you should have like a short term vision or a short term goals, right? So how do you align that with your long term vision of a product, right? Because eventually you want to maybe you want to scale your product, or you want to have a target revenue of some sort of a number, that's like a long term vision, or maybe the number of users, that's a long term vision. So how do you address that piece while keeping these short term goals?
So what I look at is like, this long term goals are basically your objectives. Like you said, you want to scale up the product, or you want X number of customers. Say you want 100K customers or something like that. That is your objective. You want to do
Right.
that, but you don't directly go there, or you directly can't go there. And it's also like not one feature which will get you there. You need to have step by step process of doing it. So how you do it is like, the short term, you need to break down your strategy of going there into like several parts. So in short term, you're looking only at the first step or probably the second step, but at the 10th step is when you achieve your objective. So it's up to you as a product manager to keep in mind the 10th step, but take one step at a time to reach it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? All right. I guess. Okay. I guess that's the last of the questions. All right. Thank you, Sundhuja. I think this was a really informative session. We spoke a lot about various, of course, the various points of how to create. Or why to create a product roadmap and what sort of an impact it has when you're building a product, and also a couple of questions which were there. I think those definitely highlighted like a couple of open points, like especially like your competitor analysis. How do you repivot very quickly if there is any sudden shift in the market, or if you want to reposition yourself as a brand. And I think for all the product managers out there, I think this was a very informative session in how do you approach in creating a roadmap. What should be your goals and objectives while creating the roadmap, because it's not a theoretical document. You're actually going to use that, and your entire product development is going to be built using this roadmap piece, right? So yeah, this was definitely helpful, and thank you once again for this session. If you want to have any last words.
It was a great opportunity. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I really liked interacting over here.
All right. All right. Thank you, Sindhuja. Thank you for giving your time on a Friday evening, and we will speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks,
All right.
everyone. Thank you
Thanks.
for joining.
Thanks. Bye.